Welcome back to the last panel of today before we're heading for the market meetings and the drinks. Also an important part of our industry, to mingle and have chance to meet each other and reflect the day and hopefully new encounters. Welcome to the Future of Shorts Revisited. It's why the future of shorts and why revisited. 2012, the last year of the former artistic director of the Kurzfilmtage, he organized this panel, which he named The Future of Short, with the question to Oberhausen, Tampere Film Festival, Jansen and Berlinale, what they think, what could the future be of short film, asking them to show a short film and then have a discussion. 2 years later, I did my master degree, and that I did the publication, went back, did interviews, and I thought, okay, that was in 2014, more than 10 years ago, and maybe we could ask this question again. I was asked by publicist. We have a book, Cinema Buch. It's a German yearly book about Swiss cinema, which is dedicated to shorts, which will come out in February. And we thought, okay, we could use this for this publication, but based also on a real talk. So that's why you will see we have more people who will present their films than are on stage. Maike Mia Höne, unfortunately, is ill, so I hope she's doing better. And Anna couldn't come, but nevertheless, we have 3 people here, and I would like to start to introduce them, and then you'll see 2 minutes excerpts of the films they proposed. So, is it the first? Is Florian Fernandez. On the right, most of you know him. Florian works for the Short Film Corner in Cannes. You're also programming for Nouveau Cinema in Montreal. I read South by Southwest Docs, is that right? And distribution company for shorts. Then we have Lyse who is a programmer at Rotterdam Film Festival, also for the short section, and Wouter Jansen, founder of Square Eyes Distribution, and former head of program at Go Short in Nijmegen. So the first film is from Florian Fernandez. You chose the film Common Pair. So let's have a view of this film.
Če vas lahko prosim, da pogledate samo v kamero.
A če, ja, se gledam, če.
To je fotografija.
Ja,
tako.
se vidim te v sliki.
Evo. Februar 2019. Jerneja obdeluje zemljo pod staro hruško peturalko. Za njo sem slišal, ker je preprečila, da bi tam, kjer raste hruška, postavili električno napeljavo. Na skrivaj je prestavila količke, ki so označevali predvideno traso.
Tle dol se ložili, tu, v prvu vrstu. Potle jaz, ko sem videla, jaz sem rekla, bojo obsekli vse, bi se nesla onde horčirke je.
To ste po noči šla?
Ne, čez dan.
A ja?
Ma, ki pa se ni bilo vedneha. Se ložili tiste kavce in pa se prišli za ne 2 dni delati. Sem imela čas.
In vam noben ni nič rekel, da ste spremenili?
Ma se kica še vijena. Še danes navijajo, da sem preložila.
Super.
Te hruške so bile pridne, tista vende. Moram imeti njih 103 leta. kar bija jasne.
Then the next film, Letter to a Friend, was the selection or the choice of Maike.
Must be strange for you to be receiving this request from me. I want to explain a bit of why I know we should start our work of investigating now. Bethlehem today has a population of more than 220,000 people. There are 18 illegal Israeli settlements encircling Bethlehem with over 100,000 settlers living in them. We are now surrounded on all sides. As you know, these settlements breach international law as stipulated by the Fourth Geneva Convention. The occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. The fact is, Israeli settlements continue to expand unabated. The most prominent of the 20 Israeli settlements surrounding and choking Bethlehem are Gilo and Har Homa to the north, Har Gilo, Bet Aridit, and Neve Daniel to the west, Efrat to the south, and Nokdim and Tekwa to the east. 2 kilometers outside of Bethlehem, coming in from Jerusalem, is Jebel Abu Ghneim, which was once a green forest with 60,000 pine trees and hundreds of animals and plants. The land's owners are from Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, Sur Baher, and Tuba. In 1997, the Israelis began destroying the forest by uprooting all of the trees in order to build Har Homa settlement. I also have been documenting this settlement since they started and can send you my photos and video of that.
And then as third film, we have the choice of Wouter. It is a Ceasefire.
I kako ti se sviđa ovom u Bosni?
Lijepo. Lijepo i malo tužno.
A?
Lijepo i malo tužno. Juče mi je pokazao Ramis, video od tvoga brata.
Kad?
Juče.
Gor kad smo bili.
Da.
Što je poginuo, jel?
Da, kad sa konjem i u šumu. Isto godinu je poginuo kao moj brat.
Ja.
2015.
Teško, šta ćeš? Pa najgore je tu, tragedija. Mada ono nije bio rat, sve drugačije opet bilo, ali malo smo i u ratu.
Da.
Prošlo svašta. A šta?
Pa ipak su bili mine iz rata, je li tako?
Ja. Pa bila sam ja i u logoru.
Da.
U Vlasanici. Još
Da.
čuo za Vlasanicu?
Da.
Tu sam bila. Mjesec dana. Boga. Sve ovako jela list. Ovako. U šumi bili, kiša padala. A ovako nadrpam lista pa jedim. Ma šuti, biš. Opas.
Then the next film, the choice of Lyse, What the Soil Remembers.
Down could you join me for the ceremonial investiture?
Een beursfonds stig vir die kinders van die vlakte, die nakomeling van hulle wat ontwortel is.
So what we established is a bursary fund for descendants from people who were forcibly removed during that time. And this bursary fund will fund the entire studies. So the question is, will this be enough? I think that's a very hard one to answer. Can asking for forgiveness, can it ever be enough? Asking for forgiveness, can it ever be enough? The university is capable of doing more in the surrounding communities, which need hands-on commitment from institution, business, and municipality alike. Anybody that wants clarity on that, but misschien meer duidelijkheid heeft op de eerste demand.
And the last film from Anna is Martin Pleur.
Allô Luna, c'est Martin. Je sais pas si tu as eu mes précédents messages. Je t'appelle car j'ai vu une fille dans la rue. Elle portait les mêmes chaussures que tu avais en 6e. Tu sais, celles avec les nuages sur les côtés. Faut me le dire, Luna, si j'ai fait une erreur. Peut-être que j'ai fait quelque chose de mal. Peut-être que je vous ai vexé un moment. Peut-être que vous voulez plus de mon amitié. Enfin, si vous voulez plus me voir, vous pouvez me le dire. Même m'envoyer un texto. Après, promis, j'arrêterai de vous harceler. Je pense fort à vous. Aujourd'hui, j'ai conduit ta voiture.
So, yeah, I asked you separately. So first of all, you didn't know what the other people selected. And also, it's this open question. Give me an example of a film, if you think in the future short film. I'm happy. I wasn't asked because I would have had a great FOMO and thinking 1,000 films in my head. And I suppose you had the same thing. It's not an absolute answer, but it's maybe a hint how you felt in that moment. So maybe you want to express how come you selected this film, and yeah, that's maybe the first question. Florian, you want to start, please?
I both asked myself what I like the most and what's my personal taste, but also what can reflect maybe the possibility of the medium. And yeah, I'm often attracted by the documentary form, and especially when it reinvents the world around us. So I felt that that hybridation between like documentary and fiction in common pair was quite daring and also very honest in the approach of the filmmaker. It's only the first shot of the filmmaker. He made a feature before only, and otherwise he's a DOP and is actually cultivating pairs. That's his job, and researching on like making a PhD on pairs and ecological stuff like this. So it was like a very honest approach, and also I wanted to show that, yeah, you can still have a super honest approach and like use the cinematographic medium and the capacity it has to transcend a topic. So yeah, that's a long answer, but pretty much it.
Yeah, it was really quite difficult. Maybe not difficult, but challenging to think of one film, especially for us who get to watch way too many films a year, especially in this round of selection period for myself. And I had different films that I was thinking about. There were films that were maybe more aesthetically pleasing for me, or films that I particularly connected with. And I think the reason why I indeed, in the end, settled for this one was the kind of curiosity of having an Ecuadorian director making a film about South Africa and the history of South Africa. And this collaboration between the two countries was really something that I'm still particularly interested in. And I think it's thinking about the future of this medium, the kind of collaborations that can come out of people from these parts of the world collaborating, and what that collaboration looks like. So that was something I'm interested in speaking about, and in how different communities are collaborating to create stories that are very much rooted in the place, but also that speaks to maybe mostly for audiences from the non-Western world.
Yeah, for me, I remember when you first did this conversation, when it came out, and that everybody really spoke about hybrid films, political films. I had been in the industry already for a bit, but like it was really like, when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I also think the future is. And now, having been around for a few more years, seeing a lot, and also seeing actually how it constantly repeats. Like, of course, we have new things happening on a technological level, or new approaches to narrative. In the end, I feel that it's always about storytelling. So when I got asked this question, I was just thinking, like, what is inspiring me right now? What are things that I see that's kind of changing as opposed to previous years? And for me, that was really about political activism that I have seen in the past years. And so when thinking of a film, I was actually thinking more about filmmakers than necessarily films. So filmmakers that I've seen taking risks, putting their own career at stake in a way to be able to speak out about something. And then I had a few filmmakers in my mind, some people that I worked with, some people that I knew more closely. So Jacob was one of the people that has been quite outspoken. So then I thought like Ceasefire would be a really good choice. And then afterwards also Jacob was one of the people on the Flotilla recently. So that kind of more determined like the choice for him. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Interestingly, in 2012, it was all proposed films were somehow hybrid. It was a moment in shorts, the hybrid format was really exploding. It was not yet a big thing in feature, and we all know this went over to feature, and it's interesting that all of you chose a documentary form, all 5 of you. I think Pear is clearly the most hybrid film, and also we can, Martin Pleur on the other side is also hybrid, and we discussed yesterday also in some way a documentary form. And also when I was now watching this, the 2 words which popped up, which I had the feeling most of the films had in common, it's about territory and power structure. So I was asking myself, what does that mean? It's interesting, the technical part didn't seem to be a drive in your choice. So
yeah, that's quite fascinating also, because also when I was watching the films here, indeed, and it's funny being on this panel where we're supposed to kind of know or have the answers, but I think we're probably all very curious about what the future is, and I think it actually does make sense that we chose films that are politically inclined, because that's where we are now, and that's where the future feels like, but also because the future seems quite uncertain and chaotic and troubling, and I think maybe that's where the directors are. And now I'm in the middle of selecting for next year, and I have to say that that's really most of the work that I've received. I work in the short and feature section, and my sections are Sub-Saharan Africa, and yeah, a lot of them are pretty much really on very local, very localized, very political, also focused on resources that are that part of the land, but also resources that are being extracted, usually violently. And so I think it actually does make sense that we are very much concerned with the political, the ecological, the environment, because that is the thing that we are all very unsure about.
I think maybe also a couple of years ago, breaking kind of the borders of genres was almost like more political act. Like I remember fights at the documentary festival in Amsterdam because people found out that there was one restaged scene in the film, and it's like, is this still documentary? And nowadays it's like, oh, you play at a documentary festival, so it's documentary, and we don't have to talk about it anymore. So I think that anyway, there's like already a lot of freedom in this within short film, but I think this kind of breaking, like with aesthetics and everything, we're kind of past that, and that it's more really about like how can we voice a message, and that it's maybe more content driven in a way. Like for instance, Jacob's film is actually super classical in its form, but still I think how he links what is happening now with what happened like years ago, and how there's like things that also keep happening politically, like I think is the strongest element then within a film like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then when thinking about shorts, I mean, this could also be valid for feature films, but when you thought about it, was also, did you think about why this film, the films you had in mind, and probably you had more than, of course, more than one, how are they linked to the format of the shorts?
I think we all work so much in the short format that for me it's like I just have like a repertoire of short films that I'm thinking of, and it's different than the features that I'm thinking of. So,
or maybe to formulate it more generally, what do you think? Seeing, okay, we are overcoming the technique, or this fetish. We could also call it. It was a fetish of the technique, overcoming it. What is the strength of short films today? And you think that will always be a difference to the feature films, beside one side is the process, but also as the result, what we see at the end.
I think it's one of the things that you say often is like the zeitgeist as well, and also like films can approach a topic in a more direct way and maybe with more authenticity at some point, and also maybe be more personal because you have less you have less expectations from the funding bodies as well, and it's a process that can be done quite quickly. So I would say like, yeah, the personal voice of the filmmaker can maybe show a bit more like into the short film world and into the feature film world. And this is what I'm trying to look for when I watch a short film, is like the person who made it behind, and if I can feel the sincerity or kind of authenticity. But like one of the conclusions also that was part of the interview was like, what's the future of short films? It's like more the present, and like today's world is like shaped that way, and filmmakers are answering to that, making short films. So it's also something that is really linked to the present as well.
So kind of how to capture zeitgeist. What is happening now that we can reflect quicker on what we are seeing in the world?
I always find this difficult because it's also kind of ignoring that people also need to earn money. So like making a short film, I mean, Wemmy was saying like, oh, it will take me another 5 years, so like 7 years to make his feature. But I mean, two of the shorts we have here both took like 3 years or something to fund and make. And like the film was finished and then we just put it on the shelf for 4 or 5 months because they didn't have money for the post-production. So like with a short film, although like sure you can react quick, but like if I look at what's playing in festival, I don't think it's often films that are made like within like very quick a quick mode of making. But I think it's also again what was spoken about in the previous panel, the fact that you don't have to think about a feature-length arc. You don't have to, like, it can be a thought, and then that's just what the film is. And so, like, I feel that there's more freedom and openness, I think, within short films that can then trigger something else instead of like, okay, it has to be something fully formulated. And also like what you see now with some films, it's like, okay, it's a political message, so you will never find distribution in the US because you will get sued, and so no distributor wants to take you. And like with a short film, it won't really get there quickly. So I think that's just the thing, that with short films, people can be a bit more daring in a way.
Yeah, the daring part is for sure. And actually, what I have experienced this year in this round of selection is that I've received more African short films that I have received in the previous 4 years that I have been at Rotterdam. And I'm very, very curious as to what is happening or what is driving this this increased number in films, but also there's an increase, but there's also a really huge kind of leap in the quality as well. And it's funny because there's somehow also a big kind of difference between the short films that I've watched where it's clearly a proof of concept and you're kind of preparing to make your feature. And then there is the really short films that you can definitely tell that somebody has taken years to even make this short film. So in the territory that I'm focused on, what has been very interesting is really the kind of a boom that's happening, and I think this boom is really this creative freedom. If we think about also how kind of the streaming platforms have been very dominant in the industry, and I think maybe people are looking for a different way of telling their story, and short films, of course, is a really good entryway into that. But I'm also interested in the filmmakers that decide to kind of stick with this format and stick within making short films. Or the ones that do make a feature and still kind of stay within, still want to make short films. I don't know, I'm very curious about that because I think there's some filmmakers who really make short films, and I'm always like, please continue making these short films, because I think it's such a brilliant way of telling all of very complex histories and stories. And so I'm always like, the short films are great the way they are, and please continue making it because it's so important. And also in this age where I feel like young people are kind of losing their focus, you know, we are scrolling every day, and so the attention span is going, and I feel like short films still have this very great power of capturing a much, much younger audience. Yeah.
I mean, in the context you were saying there's more and more short films coming from the African continent. Do you know, is it first-time filmmakers? What's their background? I mean, you're not sure what the reason is there's more film, but do you see their background? Is it first-time filmmakers? Do they come from other disciplines? Is it more people doing artistic work? Or, I don't know, what's your knowledge up there?
Yeah, so far it's been quite a surprise. It's a kind of a mixture, but most of the time it's first-time filmmakers. I just had the pleasure just 2 days ago of selecting a Zimbabwean short film. Of course, I can't even talk even more in detail about it because the program is not live yet. But I actually really kind of jumped out of my seat when I saw an email of one filmmaker and a producer, both from Zimbabwe, and they were like, "Hey, Lyse, we have a short film for you." And I've never received an email from somebody in Zimbabwe who has made a film. And what was fascinating about it was that it was also not even a co-production, and that also has been a big difference, is that I've seen more and more films from the country itself without any co-production, and I'm very curious about that as well. This also maybe kind of getting away from the usual script of having, France or whatever European country attached to the film. And it's not only this, not the Zimbabwean, but there's also been a Mozambican and all this. So there's the boom, but there's also a boom that is much more, like I said, localized and much more collaborative within the country itself. So yeah, maybe next year I can reveal more.
I was thinking, between feature and shorts, just last week, that talking with someone, sometimes, and that's often with documentary forms, doing a feature film, you have to enlarge the context, or because then the production comes and says, yeah, we need to explain some stuff. And what I like about shorts, sometimes it's like a gesture, and it stands there, and I believe the audience has to deal somehow with it. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts about that, which maybe distinguishes often, not always, but the short forms, and maybe with the films you had in mind? You can also disagree. It's totally okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, because I know that, like, the types of features we work with can also be like that, but there's just a pushback against that. Like, I worked with a Congolese film, Belgium, Congolese French production, Tongosa by Nelson Makengo, and there, for instance, like, the whole film takes place during the night, and then people were like, okay, because it's all black characters and it's in the night, I think you need to put names there, because we can't recognize who is a recurring character. And also, you need to give more context. Where are we? Where? And then the director just said, like, no, I'm not doing that. So what you get then is that, like, it's just a more challenging film for the market. But, like, there's directors doing it, but you just need to be stronger to do it. And I think, like, with shorts, you probably have less of that pushback. But I think definitely within features, it exists, but those won't be the features that you will be seeing in the cinema, but only in festivals. Yeah.
But sometimes also, like, maybe not the audience is asking for context for when it comes to short films, but I know that some of filmmakers that I know that are making documentaries are asked by the funding bodies when they are making short films also to give more context, to be sometimes more into stereotypes, like Antoine Chapon, for example, you work with. he knows very well how to write a dossier for those funding bodies, but sometimes it's a bit frustrating because like it goes in conflict with the film he wants to make as well. So sometimes it's also like filmmakers are asked by other people to be more clear before making the film, even me. So that's also a complex task. But yeah, I think that the audience maybe is more used to watch short films, will ask less context or less less details on everything.
And before you said, getting back to the more and more productions, but also giving access for parts of the world. It's a democratization through our digital world. And sometimes I ask more, and I sometimes have the feeling, especially in the art world, artists speak about their local community, but when it comes to aesthetics or styles, there's this unique how artists are trained worldwide. It's like this, it has to be, it's comme il faut to be art. And what's your experience with films? Do you believe there's maybe through film schools or a certain selection, like in Rotterdam, there's a certain character of or handwriting, so aiming to that, or do you see in contrary that in a short form it opens more up in new forms and it's maybe more how to get access to those films?
Whenever I receive, first of all, it's. I think, with every programmer, that's when you work for a festival, you just hope that the rest of the team, and particularly the director, understands who you are as a person, but also really believes in what you can add to the festival. And so I'm very grateful that I work with a team that trusts me, but also trusts my taste. And I'm also grateful to work with a festival where short films are particularly given a very big platform, and also short films where they're not, that it doesn't have to be perfect, or that it doesn't have to have a kind of a style, or that it really championing very weird and complex and sometimes funny and sometimes, so there's really a varied there's a varied taste that we can have. And I think it's such a good way to approach films, because if going back to the example of a Zimbabwean film, how would you expect a Zimbabwean film to look like or feel like, or because you've never seen it, and so you cannot even impose your own kind of Western idea of what a film like that from that place should look like. And so I think I go in with an open mind whenever I start a film or watch a film. I have a completely open mind, because even for me, myself, I've never been to Zimbabwe. I've grown around, been in places around, but I've never actually been there. So there's that openness to the place and to the people and to the story itself. For me, the aesthetic comes after. I have to know that this story is actually real, and it makes sense, and it makes sense to me, and it will make sense to the audiences, of course, because it's important for that. But I don't have already this preconceived idea of what a good short film should have. I watch the film, and if it makes me feel something, then it makes me feel something. But I know that I've been in rooms where indeed that aesthetic choice is definitely a big factor in the short film. But clearly, I'm not in those spaces all the time.
I think nowadays it's also more and more difficult. Like within short film festivals, I find it very difficult to see what the profile is of a festival, and I don't think that's a problem. but just because, like, I don't know, here you have like 35, 40 films in the international competition, so you can show a lot. So it's more, I think a lot of the bigger festivals within Europe for short films have a more kind of, let's say, art house profile, and then you have some festivals that are more like very straightforward narrative audience driven. I think that's kind of a difference, but besides that, I like within feature films, because the programs are so much smaller, it's like more clear like what type of line they have curatorial. But the issue there is that experimental film is disappearing. Like there's almost no festival really focusing on experimental work, while within short film I think there's a lot of space for that. But yeah, to really say like, okay, a festival really goes for those films, or that, like, I think that nowadays it's more and more like when I try to do that as a distributor and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to send this film to that festival, then that's always the film that gets requested and always gets selected. So it's quite difficult to, like, it's the same with Rotterdam. Like I always see films that I'm like, oh, maybe a couple of years ago this wouldn't have been in the competition, but now it's like one of the standout films in the competition. And like it's very difficult, and every year it changes also, like when there's a new person in charge, or so it's yeah, so like I find that very difficult to say. I do think, like, also kind of continuing on what Lyse was saying, that like diversity within the programming is still like quite a challenge. I think like for me, like I would love to work with more films from the African continent, but I'm just not seeing them. Like in European markets, if it's not a co-production, those films don't get here. And I know, for instance, here with Winterthur, you had Simone that really had like helped out also like finding films from the continent, for instance, and it's like those films maybe don't reach you to the traditional channels. Or in Rotterdam, I know that sometimes somebody would go to an art installation somewhere in Asia and then find filmmakers that have never been shown in Europe. So it's more difficult to get those films. And even though we're kind of globalized now through these submission platforms, I think some film communities don't reach us. I think some years ago, like Southeast Asia suddenly became very well represented within Europe, but there's still a lot of films that I just don't see. So that's still a challenge, but also like with limited budgets, it's difficult to really change much about that within festivals, I think, yeah.
So do you feel like the programming for features is much less varied than what actually short films could have?
I think with feature films, festivals have this feeling like we need to attend to an audience, but there's actually not really an audience right now for feature films. So so it's like you see films in main competitions of festivals, and it's like, this is an audience film, but it's an audience film because it's in that competition. So you can also put like a difficult film in there, and then people will also go and watch it because you have that stamp. But I think there's this preconceived idea of like, what is a film that an audience wants to see? And with short films, people just come to the identity of the festival and watch those films. But with features, I think we're still kind of like working in the surface of the industry, and that industry is like struggling. And so there's like kind of a disconnect there. So if you work with like difficult films and people say there's no market, you won't get into festivals because people say it doesn't really have a place here. And I think with short film festivals, that dynamic misses. So it's people will get exposed to films that they maybe don't want to see and then get surprised by. So I think there's a much more chance of discovery for audiences, but also for industry. Yeah.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. There's always an audience for short films. And in fact, I would have to say that even in Rotterdam, the audience for short films is like one of the biggest kind of thing around the festival, like very dedicated. And you're right, and every year there's an audience, and it doesn't matter where the film is coming from. It's that I know that every year in January I'm going to go to Rotterdam because I'm going to discover a new short film. And I also have directors who come to the festival even when they have their own film. They go to see short films. And you're completely right. There's always an audience for that, because it's also full of surprises.
What's your experience? I mean, with the Short Film Corner, you're connected to the market. Also, although your team is not so market-oriented in the classic sense, for sure. But maybe two things I would like to explore more. It's the expectations, which we already had apart, and also then, of course, the exposure and what does the audience mean? So in the terms of in Cannes, the kind of expectations. I mean, I think it's maybe tricky because there are different expectations. We have expectations of festivals, like we all do, and most of us, which are very open in approach, but then sometimes thinking which kind of audience can we reach, and if we go into a broader audience, is always the question accessibility of the content or the form, and then there's the market, which also has expectations. So, what is your experience in Cannes in context with short films?
As we collaborate a lot with different institutions like audiovisual centers, mainly from different countries, we even if we push them to have a great representation of non-fiction films, I would say that still fiction is way too much represented, and also very classic narrative fiction. And I think it doesn't come only from the wish of the institutions, but probably before, like even at film schools, I feel that a lot of film schools are trying to push filmmakers to direct well, which means nothing because everybody can direct well now. And what is a good film once again? But we often have very polished films, I would say, or film that last super long, or can feel like TV content in some schools as well. This is one of my stereotype of German film schools. Sorry about that. But when I'm watching for the festivals, and it's a bit frustrating. But yeah, we try to push to have more non-fiction content and non-narrative as well, or something that is more delving and daring as well. Yeah, that's what we see the most. I feel the institution also have their own obligations, and for them is to spread the films that they have, and most of the time, yeah, they come from the schools or from filmmakers who made those film schools in those countries. But that's also why we try to collaborate with other institutions like festivals, distributors as well, while trying to open up the span of the format and the kind of short films that we receive. Yeah.
So my question is a double question, sorry for that, but once it's okay, do you see that maybe the film schools are, we could say, they're more conservative than probably the market is demanding or festivals are demanding, but then once they leave the school, because we have to be aware, within the school context, there's a certain regulation, and most students keep to that because they have to be trained to learn the craftsmanship, let's call it that. But then when they leave the school, do you see that certain schools which follow this more conservative approach, that those filmmakers often continue with the path, or do you see a shift once they leave this setting?
Depends from the school, I would say, but maybe I feel that I have nothing against traditional short films, if we can say that, or traditional narrations, or approaching the narration, but I feel like they will maybe less travel in festival or find other ways to be seen, maybe through TV, through other channels. But that's also I also feel that some TV buyers are also super conservative in a way. When it comes to buy shorts, especially in France. So yeah, I don't really know if each filmmaker will find its way through the festival, but I still find the festival programmers and the industry are asking for, as you said, more daring shorts and maybe different approaches, or to be surprised, and yeah, to have work with no boundaries in a way.
I always find for me an interesting one, because I think the most interesting directors coming from there are actually not the people who studied directing. Yeah. So Jonathan Vinel is studied editing, and that's like I think the biggest name.
Valentin Ojaim as well, yeah. He comes from the screenwriting as well.
So it was always when I would be watching the films, it would always be like somebody not coming from directing. But it's, I mean, I think the reality is that a lot of people just won't like kind of make films for the international scene. Like if I look in the Netherlands, like I've been teaching at the film school in Amsterdam, and which is like kind of regarded like the film school in the Netherlands. I think in the past 10 years, it's 2 directors that made like a slight international kind of debut with a feature, and even with short films, it's like, again, like 2 or 3 that kind of did something, and the rest just went into television and stuff like that, or making films that only plays in Dutch cinema. So it's like that's also the reality in the end.
So is it that the schools are not catching up with what is happening in the industry, or?
I think that Mikey would say that the schools don't go off as often as the industry to festivals and don't see like what they are doing at festivals. So
it's also not an ambition for everybody. Like some people just want to make television, and but yeah, I mean the truth is like at school you get shown feature films and then you graduate with a short film. So it's like people are not really known with that format. Like I remember when working with Nsengiyumva in her second year film was the first film we worked together with in 2013. She started traveling, and then you really saw that suddenly she started watching loads of films. She got friends with like I think it was in Poitiers Film Festival, back then still called Henry Langlois. She met all the other student filmmakers kind of around, and then she started like, okay, now I can talk to international people giving feedback on my script. She saw a lot of films, and then we also, I think she's the last Dutch person getting into Cannes with the short films, and that was 2016, I think, that we were there. So it's, so you really see like, okay, when people travel more or like are better informed on what the format can offer, that like it also really improves their craft.
Yeah, I had this experience last year. I went to the university for film theory, and the films they were taught about shorts were pretty old, and there was a sentence on the presentation kind of still talking of punchline films. And I was at punchline films. That was, yeah, I don't want to say the name, but it's maybe 15, 20 years ago. But nevertheless, I mean, but do you see a shift when, talking about the future? Do you think there is a slow change, or if not, how do we have can we have and should we have a responsibility from our side to approach those filmmakers, the young, to have changed their way, to give them the openness of their way of filmmaking? A very open question, sorry.
I think maybe one of the ways that me as a programmer working for European Festival, in charge of finding new voices from the continent, I think the thing that I can do the best is to just kind of keep in touch with people, and keep in touch, I mean checking in and asking the director, because, for example, there's one director, Dika Ofoma, who is based in Lagos. He had his film in our program in this year, the 2025 program, with The God's Wife, and I reached out to him, actually, when was it? In July, and I reached out to him and I said, hey, do you have are you working on something new? Do you have, and he was surprised by email, because he was like, oh, I didn't even think that it's a good idea to send you my new film, because I was just at your festival. And so sometimes when you do talk to directors, there's they have all these kind of notions about how festivals work, but it's never really based in reality, and it's always good to kind of I don't know, because there's so many rumors about how the festival But it also, it's actually because festivals hold a very weird space for a lot of people, because it's this mystical thing, and it's also not, you cannot just go online and then find information. And also, if you are the only one or one of the few people that have been in Rotterdam, it's very hard to get information. And so when I asked him, he was like, oh, yeah, I actually do have a new film, which I had sent to Winterthur. And and he was like, maybe I should send it to you as well. Like, yes, of course, send it to me. And well, we just selected it, and it will be at the festival again. But it's, and then he was like, oh, I have another film. Can I send that to you? Is that even legal for me to have more than one film in the program? And I said, yes, of course. And so I think it's maybe it sounds very basic, but it is really kind of trying as best as I can to open a door to this festival that I think for a lot of African directors, or maybe also people here, historically Rotterdam is just also not a festival that features in their mind. Because for a lot of directors, it's Cannes, it's Berlinale, it's Sundance, because those are the festivals that they've heard about or they hear about. And so for the smaller festivals, we have a much bigger task of, kind of letting people know, hey, there's also this, and there's also that, and there's also this one. And sometimes people lose hope when they don't get into these big festivals. And there's always like, no, there's plenty. There's plenty of opportunities and platforms for you to go into. And so, yeah, I think for me, kind of having this very this huge task of opening doors to a festival that maybe has not been opened before. It is a challenging one, but it's also it's been a blessing, because I've really seen how much of that has helped and has given the motivation to directors just keep on working, because essentially the idea is that you just keep on working and keep making the work. And it's funny, every time I have a film, for example, I had one film, a South African film, a sabbatical by Karabo Lediga. I had it in Bright Future. And I cannot tell you how many emails I've received from South Africans because they saw a South African film in the program. And I think that's what it is. They just have to see themselves, and that's the click. And the more and more you select, the more and more you can attract, basically, yeah.
I think we're all kind of already trying to do something about this by making short films like visible and accessible. So like if it's by programming a festival or distributing it, or but like filmmakers or students also just have to do a little bit of an effort to then seek it out. Like also having worked in a festival, I know that it's not easy to get students to some screenings. But it's also, I think also like, again, continuing on what Lyse was saying, like opening, like spreading the knowledge to people, and like showing that it's not so like that you don't have to get a foot in the door necessarily, that people are interested in the films. I mean, it was a bit different when I was working at Go Short, because I had a stable income, and so I could just use time to give advice to people. Now I would like to have weekends off at some point, so like I have to be a bit more careful with my time. But like I was reading this book, A Woman is a School, and there like the writer was also talking about like generosity again, and that it's really about like that when you're in a position of power, you have to take time to kind of spread the knowledge. And ever since then, I've also really been trying to do this, like when I'm in a festival, that I do take, that I'm not like gatekeeping the knowledge that I've built over the years, but like when I sit down with somebody, I am just making like a festival strategy with them instead of saying like, yeah, but I get paid for this, so I'm not doing that for you. Like it's like I'm not losing by giving people like the tools kind of how to think about things. So this like radical generosity is really something that I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, how can we really put that into practice? And again, also like for instance in Rotterdam, when you get selected, you get access to this mentorship program, which I was part of last year. So then filmmakers with a film in the program can just book sessions with like producers, sales agents, and they can just ask whatever they want about their new film, about the film that they have at the festival, about. So I think this like I mean, it's the same as these industry days, the one-on-ones that you're doing. So just the fact that you can meet people and exchange knowledge is really, I think, something that's super valuable, and that I also think it's really important to make time for, to keep doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say quite the same, and also like it sounds pretty naive, but like open the mind of the filmmakers to curiosity in a way, because like for example in last year in one of our supporting programs for projects in development, we took a project that was a bit wobbly, but we felt that these filmmakers coming from the art world really needed to be like in a more industry setup at some point, just to understand better. And at the end of the festival, they came back to say, okay, we make the most of it, and now we understand why it's important, and we need to work more on like those networking and like knowing more about the festival circuit and everything. So yeah, it's also about, like as you said, like filmmakers need to do a bit of the job as well, like being curious and open-minded.
Yeah, I mean, that's my experience in all the years, and that's why I think so most of us love working in the shorts. I mean, it's a very community thinking, and I think so sharing is something very valuable, which many industry people are very open to do so. So we're going towards the end of the panel, and maybe going back to the exposure. I mean, like you said, it's in Rotterdam. There's excitement of an audience coming to shorts, and also, I mean, we cannot complain about the people coming here. We are very happy about the attendance at the screening, and looking back, the big future was the internet, shorts being there, having exposure, and that's the way things will go. But it's somehow subjectively, I think, okay, there are initiatives, it is possible, but the big boom is not here. How do you think maybe in the future, how can we get people excited about shorts, watching them more, going to festivals? I see that the classic cultural journalism, at least in Switzerland, is dead. It's all about, it shifted to people. So the big festivals with Hollywood stars, they talk about that, not even about their films, it's just people. So how can we attract it to people, not to get, it's not about getting more people, but see, there's an alternative, like the films you chose, not only following the images of media. I think so your selection is also showing, it's a reaction, what we see, what we are scrolling and seeing, following certain narrative patterns. So what do you think, or what are you hoping for the future? Still, how can we make shorts accessible, or convince people saying, hey, just be open. It's another form. It has been, it is, and it will still be.
Maybe I wish that more people from like social sciences, for example, could be in festivals as well, and maybe interact with the filmmakers who are making the films, for example. And it's a bit of a dream, yeah, but go beyond the simple Q&A session with the filmmakers, and like to involve, I don't know, sociologists, scientific people, or respected political people to come and have dialogue with the filmmakers about a certain kind of topic, and also engage the audience into that. I feel like this is the way like the audience maybe could connect even more with the films and make those films more visible. But maybe it's a bit of a dream, but yeah, I feel like maybe we would be more connected to the format of the short film if we would like involve like people coming from outside the short film world, and not only stay into the bubble of the short film world in a way.
Yeah, I think from the programming side, I think one of the ways of opening up, of course, you have to to cater to the core audience because you do want them to come every year. And I think the core audience for Rotterdam is the experimental stuff, the weird stuff, the midnight specials, and the, so that core audience is something that we cherish, and but to be able to open it up for other audiences is really about the films and what films are you selecting and how diverse can we get, and I think it's for me anyway, it has been a great challenge to really look for stories and for countries that we just never hear about, and I'm hoping that that maybe one in the films that I've selected, that maybe there's the one Zimbabwean person that lives in Rotterdam who comes to Rotterdam for the first time because it's a Zimbabwean film. And I think it's really that, it's just to be as representative as possible and to really kind of touch the communities that never come to these festivals, because also festivals are, they're privileged places, and it's always difficult to get diverse communities to come to festivals. But I think it's about what we are selecting and what we are, talking about, and who is selected, and all that. So diversity for me is the key, but also diversity throughout the festival. And I'm talking about who is working in programming, who is working in the the reception, who is working within the programming team, how diverse are we? So all that, you can't ask for a diverse audience if there's no diversity within the festival itself.
But then you reach out to, like the example of Zimbabwe. So is there an effort to reach the community? Because how could that person find out? Because if the person was already interested in culture, probably they would know your program.
Yeah, I was lucky because I had met the team last year in Durban. And so that's also part of that, is that you keep in touch with people, you meet people, and you let them know that you're open to their film. And it's really that, it's by chance, and sometimes it's just luck as well. But I know that, again, if one person sees this kind of film in the program, I know that next year I'm going to receive emails from people who would never have sent me an email, for example. And so it just starts by that. So it's all about representation.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, from the side of the audience, I mean, the filmmakers, that's one side, but then reaching the community within Rotterdam, this person from Zimbabwe, how do they find out that there is a film running from their country? Because probably if they're already interested in culture and cinephile, they would know. But how do we reach an audience which is maybe not? And your festival is very cinephile, I would say, and very experimental and opening up. I'm asking myself also the whole time, how can we reach an audience that they find out, oh, there is this film there?
Yeah, that's a question.
It's also about building trust, no? Like last time we did a panel together, Lyse was also talking about the curation program she does in Brussels, and like there it's really like you program for the community, so then when the community finds out, they will come. And I think that's always difficult when you like program one film from Turkey at one point. Like, why would these people come? Because they don't know your festival. And it's the same with having more inclusive programming. So for instance, when you start subtitling, like start programming also for people with hearing impairments, but those people don't know that you're doing that. So it will be like 5 years where almost nobody shows up, and then people start coming. So it's kind of a longer investment, and usually that's not possible because you maybe get money for a couple of years and then you stop again. So
the team changes, the director changes.
Yeah, it's not interesting anymore, and like it's not a priority anymore. And so I think that's just the biggest thing. And like again, it's a money thing, and that's the same for like making short films visible throughout the year. Like I remember when I hosted a panel here, I think it's like also 8 years ago, when it was about online platforms. Mubi was on it. Mubi's hardly doing short films anymore. Kinescope was on it. Kinescope doesn't exist anymore. So it's like now I think This Is Short is one of the few platforms that's really like invested in short film. Also with film journalism, you read an article on Talking Shorts about a short film, but you can't see that film. because it's still in festivals. So it's just difficult to see short films. And then I also have like conflicted relationship to that, because I really like the romantic idea of that you can't see a film outside of the cinema, so that maybe 8 years from now you see a retrospective with that film in it and finally you can rediscover it again. So I like gatekeeping films and just not putting it online. Also to see the film as like that it has a value, and maybe when the director does a feature, suddenly we can do something again with the short film. So like we worked with this Vietnamese director, Pham Ngoc Lan, with his short films. Then he did his debut feature. We won Best Feature in Berlinale. And then suddenly people start like, oh, maybe we could do a program with all the short films. And then they become valuable again. So it's also like an investment sometimes, but so it's a bit contradictory for me. Yeah, I think like the visibility of short films is difficult, but it's also just because there's not really a financial incentive to do it or to be able to keep doing it.
What are your wishes for the future of short film?
More African films.
I'm very happy with short films. Like I don't really have, I don't know, like every year I'm still, like I had a period that I was kind of jaded and like I felt like, okay, I'm not interested in any films anymore, but still like I fall in love with films. I work with directors that like I then fall in love with. So like people like Randa Marufi, with whom I now work, with Mayam Tafakori, like it's directors that I was following for a long time and now I'm finally working with them. So it's also, I don't know, like the short film world is so inspiring, I think, and like it keeps me interested in doing this. Like for me, it's really about the people I work with that kind of keeps me doing this work. So like I'm very, like it's not easy, but like it's never been very easy, and like we will manage. So.
I still hope the film could be more visible still, because like also some friends that are not working in the short film industry ask me where they can watch short films, and if you don't go to a festival, well, you have Arte maybe, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, I wish that it could be more visible to not only the industry and people that are really interested in to go into in festivals, and otherwise, yeah, maybe some changes and in the film schools, and like try to push people to think outside of the box and to try things. Then after they can do whatever they like. But yeah, try with short films at least a bit.
Thank you for your dedication for short film. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, the next thing is the market meetings starting at 5 o'clock at the Museum Schaffen. It's where you all got your passes. It's a 15-minute walk, but please go there as soon as you can, and we will meet up latest at the drinks at the same place. Thank you for being here, and see you soon.